Good evening and thank you for joining us. The goal of tonight's program, Kids and Cops, is to open and improve relationships between Missoula area teens and law officers and officials. Subjects we will discuss tonight include feelings between officers and teens, smoking laws, Missoula drug activity, Missoula gangs, probation officers in the court system, possession of alcohol tickets, curfew laws, and several other topics. I would like to start by introducing the person who has made our council and this program possible, Mayor Dan Kemmis.
Thank you, Ann, and thanks for all of the participation that we've had in the preparation of this forum and for all who have come to participate this evening. The Mayor's Youth Council was formed at my request by a number of citizens throughout Missoula, including a number of teenagers. The purpose of the council is to give teenagers and grown-ups in Missoula an opportunity to talk to each other about issues that concern us all. My theory behind the Youth Council is that both Missoula and its teenagers would be better off if we paid more attention to each other. And that's really the purpose of the Youth Council, is to pay that kind of attention to each other, to listen to each other, to see what we can learn from each other. I'm convinced that teenagers need to be treated like citizens who have something to contribute to Missoula, that we need to listen to them, and that if we do that, that we can more fully expect that they will listen to us when we ask them to listen to us. So this is the beginning of an effort to have a more meaningful dialogue between grown-ups and teenagers in Missoula. The Youth Forum is the forum that will be presented to you this evening is the work of the teenagers who have been involved in the council. They have put it together. They have asked for some assistance from the grown-ups on the council, but it is their forum. And I, for one, am looking forward to it, and I want to thank you for the work that you've put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kemmis. Next, I would like to introduce the members of both of the panels, starting with the teen moderators. From Loyola, Kagan Yoakum, a junior. From Hellgate, Cammie Darnell, also a junior. And from Big Sky, another junior, Julie Partaker. And myself, Ann Morin, a senior at Sentinel. Next, I'll introduce the panel members, and those include Keely Flato, a sophomore at Sentinel. Joe Mudd, a junior at Loyola. Jennifer Getz, a junior at Hellgate. And Jessica Trexler, a sophomore at Big Sky. Next, I'll introduce our police panel, starting with Sergeant Dick Lewis. Dick is a 16-year veteran with the Missoula Police Department, having served in the Patrol Division, Detectives, and the Motorcycle Unit. He is currently assigned as a sergeant in the Patrol Division and is a graduate of Hellgate High School. Next, we have Sergeant Stanley Fullerton, a 15-year veteran with the Missoula County Sheriff's Office, and he has served in the Patrol Division, the Detective Division, managing the Warrants Unit, and currently is assisting as a sergeant in the Patrol Division, and he is a graduate of Sentinel High School. Next, we have Officer Guy Baker, and he is a 2-year veteran in the Missoula Police Department, serving all his time to date in the Patrol Division, and is a graduate of Big Sky High School. Glenn Welch is the supervisor of the Juvenile Probation Office, or Youth Court, for the 4th Judicial District. He has worked in this office for 17 years. He is a U of M graduate, having come from Butte. I would like to invite those of you viewing at home to call in your questions or comments at 523-4684 and 523-4685, and you can call anytime during the program with any questions or comments you may have directed towards the panel. With that, I will move to our first question. Keely?
Yes, this first question is for Dick Lewis. It's asked by Kim Perry, a Sentinel senior. Do police officers have to meet a monthly ticket quota by the end of each month?
Monthly ticket quotas have been something of a miss since I've been in the police department. We don't have a specific monthly quota that officers are required to meet. We're very fortunate in Missoula Police Department. We are allowed to write as many tickets as we'd like. The only thing we're judged by is our supervisors do judge the amount of tickets we write and what kind of tickets are written as to how much traffic enforcement and what kind of work we're doing on the street. So we use it as a parameter to monitor. We don't have any specific number. So the old adage of trying to get your quota near the end of the month isn't true for the Missoula Police Department.
Joe?
This is a question for Mr. Welch. Is the drug problem in Missoula growing, and what do you plan on doing about it, if it is?
Well, we're not seeing a problem with the drug situation getting any bigger. I mean, we're always going to have a drug problem. Is that if anybody's using, then we have a problem. I don't see it growing. I think that the problem that we're seeing more and more often now is with alcohol and kids who are having problems with alcohol. I'm not saying that kids are not using drugs, because kids are still using drugs. But what we plan on doing about it is, you know, we're going to keep enforcing the laws, and we do have drug enforcement teams from the state, the feds, and our local teams that are working in town that are working those things. And when we get referrals from our office, we're handling those things accordingly.
Jennifer?
This question is for Officer Baker, and it comes from a Hellgate Junior male. What weapons, such as knives, are illegal?
What was the question again?
What weapons, such as knives, are illegal?
Well, the whole thing that makes a weapon illegal when it comes to a knife is the length of the blade, which cannot exceed 4.5 inches, and therefore then if it's concealed, and then that's what is illegal, is if it's a concealed weapon. And the concealability of it is that it cannot be wholly or partially concealed, and that applies for guns as well.
Jessica?
I'd like to direct this question to Officer Lewis, and it was written by a Hellgate senior, a male, and it's, when you picture the average high school student, what first pictures and words come to your mind?
Basically, when I picture our high school people in this community, I see a really diverse group of young individuals striving to attain different goals in their life and different things. You have to remember, as a police officer, we probably work with about 9 or 10% of the youth in the community on more than a once or twice basis during their juvenile career. And to stereotype everyone as a good kid, a bad kid, a gang member, a non-gang member, a jock, a jockette, you really can't do that. I've really strived throughout my career, and I know a lot of the other officers have too, to treat the young people we come into contact with as individuals rather than trying to group them into one kind of a group or another. If you associate yourself with that kind of an individual or a group, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, dresses like a duck, it's going to be a duck. So you've got, kind of got to figure out where you're going to go and what you're going to go with it.
Would any of the other officers like to elaborate on this or put some input on there?
Stanley's been quiet.
Well, I don't think you can, there's not an average anything. You're going to run into individuals no matter what you do. It's like in this job, ask you, what's the average cop? Well, we all think different and have our own ideas, and you're just dealing with individual people. I think sometimes you tend to, because of how people dress or whatever, you kind of, in your own mind, group them into certain categories, but basically when you get on a one-on-one situation, start talking with people, you get a pretty good idea on, where they might be coming from or what their orientation is.
Thanks. Keely?
Yes, this question is for Officer Baker. This is asked by Jason Nicholson, a Big Sky senior. Why do police officers scout the parking lots at lunch?
We're just talking about kids as being individuals. I suppose that would apply to police officers too and their patrol techniques. I don't personally scout the parking lots at noontime, but I guess the parking lots are as part of the city as is the community, and a lot of times when a police officer is in an area, it's just a preventative patrol technique that if you're visible and there, it cuts down on any crimes that possibly are going to occur. I guess, so I'm not skirting the question. At the high schools at noontime, obviously the kids are out of school, and that's anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 kids that can be in any given area, and we've had some problems with disturbances, and so if we're there to begin with, maybe that will keep the disturbance from occurring.
Did you have something to add, Officer Lewis?
Only that when you have, like Guy says, 12 or 100 or more kids, you young people seem to like to draw attention to yourself. Leaving little rubber things on the pavement to say, hi, I left for lunch, to coming back across the lawn being late for lunch, to throw your lunch bag out the window, these kind of things. When the average citizen sees this, the complaint comes to the police department, therefore we have to respond to citizen complaints. And when you get that many young people caged up for 4 or 5 hours in the morning and all of a sudden they release all that energy, it seems to be at noontime you're going to see a lot more of us in the area. There is such a thing as what I do is stop and say hi to the young people that I know are my friends. And I don't get a chance to get into class sometimes or during my schedule or whatever, and I can drive by at lunch and see 20 or 30 kids that I know or have dealt with. It's kind of one way to get to say hi and how you doing and what's up.
Joe?
This is for Sergeant Fullerton. It's asked by a Hellgate freshman female. It says,
Break the mic first.
do you think drinking would reduce if the drinking age was lowered, since many kids do it simply for the risk?
Do you think it would be reduced?
Yeah.
No. When I was in high school, I was 18 years old, and I think it was quite the opposite. You had people that were like seniors in high school that were legal to buy beer, and they tended to a lot of times supply it for their friends who were younger grades, junior, sophomore, etc. I think probably where you're coming from is, why should drinking be legal for an 18-year-old when, everything else, I'm an adult, I can go to, adult jail at 18, I can go to the Army, that type of stuff. And really it's probably a legislative problem, but I think Montana years back experimented with having the lower drinking age, and the general populace just felt that it just wasn't working out as far as all the other problems it was causing with younger people, so that's why it went back up. Some states in the country are 19 still, but I don't know any that are still 18. But as far as decreasing, no, I don't. I think it would just be the opposite effect.
Thank you. Jen?
This is for Mr. Welch. Would you give a basic overview of what a probation officer does?
A basic overview of what we do? Well, I guess our job basically is to deal with young people who are having problems in their lives, whether it be through law enforcement, whether it be through the schools or with their families. Our job is basically our problem-solving kinds of jobs where we're trying to help kids work through what they're working through, and also try and balance that situation with trying to help protect the community. So I guess with our jobs, we wear a whole bunch of different hats. We wear the hat of a counselor and a friend. We wear the hat of being the bad guy. And through the kids' eyes, when we end up in court and we have to make a recommendation of incarceration or something like that, we have to wear the hat of a public servant when we're dealing with the taxpayers and your parents, to let those people know that they're being protected. So when we're dealing with kids, we're dealing with kids in lots of different ways and lots of different areas, which makes our job pretty interesting at times. It can also make our job pretty difficult when you're trying to change those hats pretty rapidly as the kids' behavior changes. So I guess as a basic overview, we're basically there to try and help kids get through their adolescent lives, and hopefully when they turn 18, we can look back and see that they're some sort of productive citizen after they enter their adult life.
Thank you. I would like to once again invite any of the viewers at home to call in either of our lines with your questions or comments. And those numbers again are 523-4684 and 523-4685. Next question from Jessica.
Okay, a Big Sky student, a freshman, has asked if there has been an increase of violence in Missoula in the past years. Would you like to talk about that, Sergeant Fullerton?
not having specific statistics, I'm just going as perception, and I think there has. I know I'm going on calls now, not exclusively with younger people, but, you know, just general complaints, all ages, and we do have a lot more violence than we used to encounter. Like I said, I can't give you any real hard and fast, you know, comparisons of 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but I'm just basing this on my perceptions from when I first started. But I think all of us over the years, we've all had calls that, you know, they're crazy, and you think, Jesus, something like this happens in Missoula, but it does.
Sergeant Lewis, have you noticed an increase in your 16 years?
I think I'm with Sergeant Fullerton. I think we've all noticed a definite increase in weapons calls and serious calls as far as fighting goes. It used to be, when I first started a few years ago, was 2 guys square off in the alley at the Sugar Shack. Now it's 2 guys square off and 800 come to watch. We've had situations wherever the young people gather, whether it be under the bridge, at McDonald's, at Burger King, at 39th and Russell, CLC Church, wherever they gather, you'll have an incident where a weapon is shown, either a club, a gun, a knife. These things are becoming more prevalent, and I think that's one of the important things these young people have to understand when an officer responds to these kind of calls. He's there for, his only reason to be there is, number one, take care of the complaint or problem, but the basic thing on his mind is his safety. And the things he does at those calls are because he wants to assure that, first, things are under control and the environment he is in is safe for him and everyone else to be there. I know some young people get real upset when an officer responds if his weapon comes out, or if he has a gruff manner, or he puts somebody against a car and pats them down. They think their rights have been violated. The number one thing on that officer's mind has got to be officer safety. And if you go to enough of these calls like Guy and Stanley and I have, and you see a 15-year-old male or female with a knife or a gun, or every kid, and you know as well as I do, if you look around the parking lots at the high schools, every kid's got a pool cue in his car, he's got some kind of nunchucks or some kind of weapon in that vehicle, you can see, or he'll pull out. So I think things have increased.
Yeah. We have a question from the audience, and that is, what was it that encouraged each of you to get into law enforcement? Do you want to start, Sergeant Lewis?
The encouragement came from an officer who took me on a citizen ride one night. And I saw a lot of things that I liked about law enforcement. The interest of every call, no matter how mundane or how normal, is different every time you go. The opportunity, as all of us, I'm sure, you'll say in every interview, why do you want to be a policeman? To help people. But you do have an opportunity to make a difference in the community. And you can do with what you want with that opportunity. You can either take it all the way or you can just get by with it. But the opportunity to do something that is actually some good is there. The interest of the job, and I think it's something you can really be proud of as a profession, and you can dedicate your life to, and that's really a good point.
Sergeant Fullerton?
My interest came from a man who's a city police officer now, Doug Hartzell, and at the time when I was in high school, he was a deputy sheriff, and Doug and I became friends through we just met, and I used to go ride with him, and he was kind of my idol at the time, and still is, I suppose, so if Doug's watching. But I just found that, the job to me was interesting, like Dick said, and basically when you start your shift, you have no idea what you're going to be doing that 8 hours. You end up, seeing some very horrible things to all the way to seeing some, real good tangible things that you're doing, helping people. After I became friends with Doug, I joined the Sheriff's Cadets, which is still in existence, which is a high school youth group, and basically just furthered my interest in law enforcement through that, and I became a reserve officer and eventually went to college for law enforcement in Spokane and got hired by the Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Officer Baker?
Guess I'd have to say that I grew up in the environment. My father's been in law enforcement as well as my grandfather. When I went to college, it was for business administration, but after 3 years, I pretty much decided this is what I want to do, and I felt very fortunate that I could get hired as young as I was at a department such as Missoula. It's a very good department. And I did it for the same reasons that they did, that to help people. And the fact that every single day and every single call, even if it's a disturbance at the same house or the same players that you went to last week, it's always different. And, you know, the times that you can make a difference are maybe a little farther and fewer between than you'd like, but they do make up for the times that you're the bad guy.
Thanks. At this time, I would like to once again introduce Kagan Yoakum, who is our next moderator. Kagan.
Okay, Keely, do you have a question?
Yes, this question is for Mr. Welch. It's from Coley Spencer, a Big Sky senior. Who does someone contact if he or she feels a police officer has infringed on that person's constitutional rights?
Well, I think if any citizen feels that their rights have been violated, I think the place to start would be with the supervisor from the department. If I found myself in that situation, I think I would talk to Chief Oberhofer or Sheriff Chase in Missoula. I think that's the starting spot. If the person has been charged with a crime or whatever, I think the county attorney's office is the place to go. So I think the supervisor of the departments would be the place to start.
Joe, do you have a question?
Yeah, I think Sergeant Lewis, you could probably answer this. Why do some police officers seem to treat teenagers differently than adults? And that's from a Hellgate freshman female.
Well, I think you're going to run into, just like everybody out in the real world, police officers are all different individuals with different makeups. I'm sure that we would not like a world full of Dick Lewises, or we wouldn't want a world full of Doug Chases. When I come on, that's the only name you heard in law enforcement was Doug Chase. We all want to mold ourselves to do the same kind of job, but in our own individual ways. Again, what I tell kids when I go to criminology classes is, remember, we have to get up in the morning, and we have flat tires, and we have fights with our wives, and we have kid problems at home. We have neighbors coming up 24 hours a day knocking your door saying, "You're a policeman, right? Well, I've got this problem with my neighbor's dog." You know, and maybe the officer is trying his best to be in a good mood that day. Maybe he just came off a horrible suicide, or maybe he just came off of a baby that quit breathing and the mother's screaming at you to try to get her baby back to life. I mean, we have to handle these situations. So maybe the officers just come off of something like that in a situation. It's hard to sit and kind of to deal with these things when you're not being specific. But we are real people. We have real problems. We try to handle all the problems that are called upon us, and to the best we can. Officers that tend to treat young people or anyone else the same way they get treated. If you come across and the first thing in your mouth is, "Why you hassling me, pig? What's your problem?" you're probably going to get my attention. Whereas if it comes across the other way, I know that the officers in our department, and I can speak for most of them on the panel here, try to treat young adults as young adults. And when you stop acting like a young adult, then you're going to be treated whichever way you decide you're going to act.
Officer Guy Baker would like to add something?
Yeah, one point that Dick brought up there, you know, the kids are quick to say, "Why do you treat us different than maybe an adult," or whatever. But I found that, as Dick said, when a kid comes across with an attitude, or they have preconceived notions that I don't like cops for whatever reason, I mean, you can feel that way because each individual has their own feelings. But a lot of times, you know, kids are so quick to point out that we do that to them, yet they don't realize it, or maybe they do it, they don't acknowledge it. They're doing that to us because, you know, I try to treat everybody as fair as I can and try to keep, you know, empathize with their problems and stuff. But a lot of times I feel that I'm being put in a box with other police officers because they don't know who I am as an individual, and they'll just lump us all in a pile from past experiences.
Okay, thank you. A member of our audience would like to ask each law enforcement representative to give an example how youth and police could increase relationships and possibly better them in the future.
I'll start.
Okay.
Well, I know one thing I like is, you know, if I'm out somewhere on a call or whatever, if, you know, someone makes an effort to speak with me, I mean, I don't think any of us are, you know, we like to be treated like people too, and not be stonewalled. I think a lot of times, I was thinking about the question they were answering, a lot of times our dealing with kids or young people is we have encounters when people are in groups, and with adults, it's not as high a percentage maybe. We're maybe dealing with adult situations more on a one-on-one thing, whereas kids, it seems like a lot of times we're dealing with a group thing. And I don't know if any of you have read, psychology of crowds, but people in crowds can tend to do things that they wouldn't do, as an individual. So I think mostly, just if you feel like talking to an officer, same with us, make an effort to speak, but you don't have to feel that we're unapproachable either.
Okay, thank you. Sergeant Lewis, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've had a problem with in Missoula, and we've been real fortunate to have the criminology programs in the high schools for several years now, but communication of a chance to go out and meet with the young people one-on-one and say, what do you do? Why are you doing it? Where we seem to have the problem is the young people seem to watch too much TV and think that because they saw something on TV, that's the way we have to do things, or that's the real way to do it. And again, the communication, the one-on-one, getting out of that police car, walking up to a group of young people, or vice versa, coming over to a police officer. We're trying to effect an arrest, and all of a sudden we have 13 or 14 people yelling, this isn't right, or that's wrong, or why are you doing this, or what are you doing? Our main concern is controlling that situation. I think it'd be real interesting for some of the groups in the community to invite an officer to come and speak with them, to come and be with him. Even if he doesn't have to speak, just invite him to come down and say, hi, we're the Kiwanis, or hi, we're whatever, the radio club or the CB club or whatever. Would you come to our meeting and give us an opportunity? Now, not all officers enjoy working with young people. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, because it's not true. Remember, we have a job we have to do. We have to work in some guidelines. We may not always agree with the guidelines. A lot of it's legislature established, or maybe even policy from our department. But we do have to work within some guidelines, and that needs to be understood by the public and the kids out there. Is there things we can do, and there's things we can't do. We're not all magic, and we can't fix everything, and we can't change everything. But if you communicate with us, give us a chance, that's all we ask for, is just an opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Officer Baker, any comments?
They pretty much summed it up. I would just say that as in any relationship, be it with your parents or husband, wife, girlfriend, or kids, it's communication is paramount. It's a cornerstone of it. And by breaking down the walls, or the perceived walls between kids or the public and law enforcement officers, by just coming up and being approachable, a lot of the one-on-one stuff, if that's done enough, it will start to be the norm.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Welch?
Yeah, I think a big thing that the kids have to start realizing is this isn't an us against them kind of a deal. Police officers are employees of the public. They're here to serve the public. Kids are part of the public. That's as easy as that. And when kids start realizing that police officers aren't here to try and catch you at something, they're here to protect you from the people that are doing the things to you, then those things, attitudes seem to get a little bit better. When lines are drawn, the us against them kind of a deal, then's when we run into the problem about, why do they do this to us, or why do they do that to us? If you take back a step about the parking lot question that was asked, the parking lot question and the police officers that are in the lot are not there to catch people at anything. They're there to try and protect somebody from being victimized, being hurt, being whatever. So the officers there basically to help out, not to try and be a detriment. They're there to try and help out. And if that view by young people would be looked upon these guys as being your friend, as being somebody who's there to protect you or to help you, I think the us against them thing will start to disappear.
All right, thank you. Jessica, do you have a question?
A senior at Sentinel asked, when a ticket is issued for a seatbelt violation, is one ticket issued per person or per car? How about Officer Baker?
When the driver is responsible for everyone in the vehicle ensuring that they're wearing their safety belt, so if he's in violation, he gets the citation, and if the passenger is in violation, he gets the citation. If everyone in the vehicle is not wearing the seatbelt, it's just one ticket. One driver, one ticket.
Okay, I'd also like to remind those viewing at home to feel free to call in with any questions or comments at 523-4686 or 523-4685. And we have another question from the audience. All of the law enforcement panel grew up in Missoula. How do you feel that the youth differ from those you grew up with? Anyone like to answer that?
See, I think I can remember being a youth once. Yeah. I don't think we're that much different, in all honesty. From what I see out there today, the youth of today have quite a bit more demands upon their decision-making of the drugs are more prevalent. You still have the alcohol we had to decide against. The drinking age was 21 back when I was a kid. You still have to make those same decisions and face the same problems we faced back then. And what I do in the criminology is I make a statement to all the youth that I talk to. You can make any decision you would like. You're a responsible human being that knows right from wrong. I just want you to remember, when you make a decision, I personally will hold you responsible for any decision you make, and it is your decision. But as far as any difference between, yeah, maybe the haircuts are starting to come back. I see Joe there's got a flat top again. I used to have hair, and it used to be flat, so no difference.
Thank you. Jennifer, do you have a question?
Yes, this is for Officer Lewis. How do police officers react to the nickname Pig?
Well, again, I guess it's, I go back to you, and if I call you a dirtbag or a hairball or be disrespectful to you, I guess what kind of frame of mind would that put you into as far as you and I trying to communicate on a problem?
Not very well.
It becomes very difficult for officers to keep that fair-mindedness and that open mind and things like that when you start being called names. I think it reverts back to a real important point that Glenn brought up is we're out there to serve you. And because we become a focal point of your frustration sometimes. And we try to understand that the best we can. If you have an officer that you don't think treated you fairly or squarely, you certainly need to communicate that further on down the line to his supervisor and our shift supervisor and his lieutenant, and then goes on and on. The mistake I see the young people making is categorizing all of us as a bad guy because you had one bad experience with one officer in a certain situation. So the next time any officer drives by, he then becomes the IE pig. That officer, like I say, not having the best day in the world, may stop and chit-chat with you, and you may escalate that into anything you would like. But again, it goes back to that frame of mind of, you treat me how I like to treat you.
Okay, Keely?
Yes, this question is for Officer Baker. Under what situations would an officer enforce the curfew law?
After the curfew hours, I guess, is what the staff would want to hear. But basically, that's changed. That's one thing that's kind of changed from when I was in high school. I mean, I'm only 23. It wasn't that long ago. But the liability that the city of Missoula, as well as the police department and myself, have on, say, allowing a kid to go home, and if he doesn't and something happens to him, that's a lot more paramount than it was before. I know myself, if it's right around, within 5 minutes, I'd probably give them a warning. But if they put me in a position again, then as Dick said, they made that decision. I try to treat people like I'd like to be treated. But once you get into a half an hour, hour later, I always enforce a curfew there, especially, and I'm not being sexist or anything, but with females, for an example, if they came in contact with police at 1:30 or 1:45 and the officer told them to go home, gave them a warning, trying to be nice, and left, and an hour later, whenever they were, assaulted sexually or just physically assaulted, the liability of the police department from that standpoint that, their safety was impeded by us not doing our job, and I'm sure a parent would be concerned with that.
Okay, Sergeant Lewis?
With the city curfew, I guess a couple other things that are brought to my mind is, number one is, after the hour of 1 p.m. on Friday and Saturday, there's nothing left for young people to do except get into trouble. And I think that's been, for years and years that I've been here, that just bears fact. If you're out that time in the morning, the shows are gone, every kind of entertainment you want is gone, and usually we have a problem. We'd also like to get you young people home before the bars empty out. We do have those semi-intoxicated or intoxicated adults out there driving around, because there's nothing worse than knocking on a front door telling some parent that your son or daughter won't be home tonight because they've been in an accident or killed. So the curfew is a way to control you young people, get you off the streets. There's nothing for you to do but get in trouble. I'm not saying everybody does get in trouble after 1 o'clock, but the opportunity then becomes greater. And that's basically, I'm with Guy, you know. I will give you an opportunity if you're close. Most of the time, the young people know what they're doing, and they know they're out, and they know what they're doing. And all of them say, yeah, but, you know, your curfew says 1, my mom says 1:30. Sorry.
Okay, we have a call-in question, and the question is, do cops feel that they are underpaid? Anyone like to answer that? Sergeant Lewis?
We're not supposed to do yes or no, but with the mayor and Dennis sitting here, I'm going to say, personally, most of the officers, you know, we make an adequate living. I'm not going to say we're underpaid or overpaid. Pay doesn't have 100% to do with the job of being a police officer. And I know that Sergeant Fullerton and Guy can talk about there's some rewards you get from being in this job, that it's just not only the money. We like we say, we like to help people, and you get some rewards of being there at the right time and doing the right thing, and it fulfills you as a person. So I'm not completely tickled with my money, but I'm not unhappy either.
Mr. Welch?
It's obvious these guys aren't going to respond to that question, so let me respond for them. Obviously, these guys are fairly intelligent people that work real hard, and they're not getting paid enough. You can't tell me that one job out in the community where a guy has to go out every morning and put on a gun and might not come back, they get paid the salaries that they get paid. You know, I don't mean to run down your garbage collectors or road department people or any of those kinds of people, but lots of those people get paid more than our law enforcement people do. None of those people can go to work and every day may not come back, and that's a scary deal. So, you know, when people set the salaries for law enforcement, the taxpayers, you know, one of the things that get shortchanged are these folks.
Okay, thank you. Joe, do you have a question?
Yeah. Sergeant Fullerton, I think you could probably answer this. This is a question from John Pritchard at Hellgate Senior. It says, why are such parks as Greeno and Bonner Park closed at night? He feels people should be able to walk as late as they like. I guess that's kind of with the curfew question.
I suppose it all has to do with like similar type thing, the curfew thing. The city council has set certain rules on city parks that he feels for the public good, and a lot of the things have to do with like drinking in the parks. I don't specifically enforce city ordinances. We don't enforce city ordinances in the county, obviously. I'd really like to defer one of these guys. I'm not really sure what the various rules are in the city parks. Like I said, we just don't have very little contact with situations in the parks.
Anyone else like to comment?
Go ahead, Dick.
Basically, city parks, I guess, Joe, I'll ask you a question here. At 11:30 at night, what would you do in a city park?
Couldn't tell you.
That's basically one of the reasons we close them at 11 o'clock. I couldn't tell you why you'd want to be in a park after 11 o'clock. We find out we have an increased amount of vandalism to our park property, and not only our sprinkler systems, our lawns, our outbuildings, our swing sets, the trees, the band shell at Bonner Park. We have a serious problem with the noise level. Most of the parks are in residential areas, and these people have the right to, to expect that peace and quiet at night. And after 11 o'clock at night, the sound carrying all over the neighborhood. So basically, those are basic reasons why we keep the parks closed at 11 o'clock, because, again, like you said, Joe, I have no idea why I'd be there.
We have another call-in question, and I think I'll direct this to Sergeant Lewis. And they'd like to know how kids and adults can ride along with officers and learn what their job is like, how to get involved in that.
My understanding at this time is the police department has no formal ride-along program. If you know of an officer and he would be agreeable to take you with him on a ride, as long as you can get your parents to sign the waiver and sign a waiver of liability, come down, you may be able to arrange it through the officer. But again, my word of caution is this is a dangerous business. And the officer's responsibility, once he has you in that vehicle, is for your safety. It becomes a kind of a hindrance on him or her if you have a citizen rider and get into a situation because you're worried about your rider, and you're also worried about yourself and the situation you're in and the public. So it puts kind of an undue burden on them, and we don't like to see officers tied up with a civilian rider every single night. But if you can get a hold of an officer, set something up, that's the way to go about it.
Okay. Jennifer?
I have a question for Mr. Welch, and it's from Aaron Audreyson from Big Sky Freshman. With all the problems concerning alcohol, why aren't there laws against its advertisement?
That's a good question. It's a thing that we talk about a lot. I mean, every time you watch a ball game, you watch anything on TV, you see all these beautiful women running around on beaches drinking beer. It never shows the guy crawling, dragging himself out of bed with a hangover that wants to commit suicide the next morning. That's a real good question, and it's a question that needs to be addressed by the media people. I really don't have the answer for that. Why they're the people with the bucks. It's a big business. The advertisement is wonderful, and they sponsor lots of things. And the advertisement is not a good situation. We were talking about that the other day when we were watching, a basketball game about, the problems that it causes, but it never shows that guy that's waking up Sunday morning that feels terrible. And it's a great question, and I really don't have the answer. Maybe somebody should address the media with that.
Okay, at this time I'd like to turn over my position to Cammie Darnell from Hellgate High School.
The next question will be from Jessica.
A junior at Hellgate asked, if I was high and the police caught me, but without possession of any illegal narcotics, what could they do to me? How about Officer Baker?
Well, there are laws against, self-inducement of intoxicating substance. The one subsection of the driving under the influence pertaining to alcohol is also driving under the influence of alcohol and/or intoxicating substances. I guess I can't answer what I would do because it would depend on the situation and how he was acting at the time. But yes, he could still get in trouble for having ingested it and not having actual drugs in his possession.
Officer Lewis, would you like to expand on that?
Just a real quick comment. I think one of the major concerns of an officer is for the well-being of that young person who's under the influence of whatever it is. We become concerned as officers about your health when we go down under the bridge or wherever it may be, or a house party, and we see an individual, say a young lady or young man, so intoxicated they can't speak or say their name. Our major concern isn't the bust, or i.e. the ticket count. It then becomes the well-being of that young person. We spent many hours sitting out here on the park bench attempting to find the identity of a young person. It's very interesting when at a house party or down below the bridge or McDonald's and there's an intoxicated person laying in the parking lot and the officer goes, "Who knows this guy?" It's like an anthill. Everybody goes, and they're gone. And the officer's left there with some young lady puking in the back seat of his car, not knowing who she is or where she is at. So, one of our major concerns is the well-being of that individual. If you are high on something and you're not, quote, normal or acting in a normal behavior, we have to be concerned about your health. And can this affect you? Can it kill you? What can it do to you? So that's the other thing an officer has to be aware of. It's your responsibility as an officer to make sure that individual is okay. I can't just turn my back and walk off. There's no one else for me to pass the buck to.
Officer Fullerton?
I think in the same light, I know over the years I've had many calls like people drunk or high or whatever, and get themselves in all kinds of jams. I'm thinking particularly like young ladies end up getting raped, in a compromising situation, end up getting raped, and so we worry about that quite a bit. Situations where people really don't have enough sense to be taking care of themselves because they're just so screwed up.
This is a call-in question, and Officer Fullerton, if you could answer this. What is the relationship between the Sheriff's Office and the City Police?
It's very good. Missoula's small enough, I mean, we're not dealing with the Los Angeles, you know, like in Los Angeles County, there's something like 85 police agencies. You know, LA Sheriff is 10,000 officers, LAPD is about 9,000. I mean, that just boggles my mind to think about it. In Missoula, I think the police department roughly has about 70 officers, and we're about 45, 47, somewhere in there. And we have a lot of cross-jurisdictional type situations. You know, just because of the nature of the geography, you end up, you know, working with each other on calls. City police car might be close to one of my guys that needs a backup. On the other side of the coin, one of my cars might be close to one of their guys that needs a backup. So, you know, we interact quite a bit. And another reason we have to is the criminals don't really respect jurisdictional lines. I mean, if you guys got a guy who's gone out and done 40 burglaries, he doesn't confine them all to the city or the county. Usually he'll have 10 or 15 in the city, 10 or 15 in the county, might be a few more down in Ravalli County. So we got to share information or we're not really effective taking care of the public.
I'd like to remind you, the people watching on MCAT, to call the numbers if you have any questions. The numbers are 523-4684 and 523-4685. Now a question from Keely.
Yes, this question is for Glenn Welch. What are the factors determining whether or not a juvenile is tried as an adult, and what is the maximum age a person may be tried as a juvenile?
The maximum age of juvenile can be tried as a juvenile. We lose jurisdiction when they turn 18. After a kid turns 18 is the age of majority, and they'll be tried as an adult at that time. What are the factors? What we call a transfer proceeding. Transfer proceeding is one of the 7 major crimes, which would be rape, robbery, homicide, aggravated assault, aggravated burglary, possession of explosives, sale of dangerous drugs. If you commit one of those 7 crimes and you're over the age of 14, you could possibly be tried as an adult. When we go in for a transfer proceeding, we have to show a lot of things in those transfer proceedings. It's a special hearing that takes place, and we have to show, you know, a background that the kid has. Is the kid you know, had a chance in the juvenile system? Has he responded in the juvenile system? Has he not responded in the juvenile system? There's a lot of nebulous kinds of things that go on in the transfer proceedings. Transfer proceeding is pretty difficult. It's real difficult to transfer a kid from youth court to adult court. Has been done. As a matter of fact, there's some defense attorneys that would rather have their clients when they're charged with one of the real serious crimes in adult court rather than in our court because of the sentencing laws. They would rather be sentenced as an adult. So some of the factors that go into the thing are the type of crime, the age of the youth that committed the crime, background, and those kinds of things.
Now a question from Joe.
Officer Baker, question asks, do officers really sit in the Holiday Inn and spy for alcohol under the bridge?
There again would be like one of the last questions you asked me. I personally don't do that. I know sometimes when the problems get bad, we have undercover officers at points around an area where there's problems, and they'll be directing uniform patrol in. But as a general practice, I don't do that, and I don't know of a lot of guys that do. But there again, if that's occurring, you know, there's been some indication there's a problem there, and there needs to be a police presence to ensure the welfare of the people there, as Dick was saying.
Now a question from Jen.
It's for Officer Lewis. It's from a Big Sky female sophomore. Do teenagers get picked up more often for traffic violations than adults?
It may seem like that, but that's not true. I probably have written as many or more tickets than anybody as far as traffic violations. I had 5 years on the motors. It may seem like we target young people. That's not necessarily true. What an officer does when he's out there is he observes a violation. And if you make yourself more known to me than someone else, I'm going to focus on you. Therefore, if I'm working Higgins Avenue, and that's your place, that's your little domain you're going to be in, of course I'm going to with more juveniles than adults down there. I mean, what adult in their right mind is going to go on Higgins Avenue on a Friday night at 10 o'clock? I mean, it's not going to happen. So you're going to have, you know, the numbers, but no, I don't see any officers focusing on juveniles because they're easier. They're not any easier than an adult. You still have to meet the same criteria for your violation that you meet for an adult. So it's not any easier, and I don't know of any officer that I'm aware of that focuses on young people.
Now a question from Jessica.
Jennifer Davis, a Hellgate senior, asks, why must a minor who is out of the home with permission of their parents have to live with a legal or temporary legal guardian in order to receive a free education at a high school? I guess Glenn Welch would be the best to answer that.
I don't have the answer to receive a free education. I don't know that part of the question, and I don't know what this person was. They obviously have something going on in their life that I don't know about. But as far as we're concerned, and as far as the court's concerned, kids living out on their own have problems. I mean, they have problems with finances. They have problems with all those kinds of things that make things real difficult. So kids need to be living with somebody who's going to be responsible for them. That's a fact of life. I know our district courts, district judges have directed us that if we know kids are living out on their own that have broken the law, then we need to find some place for those people to be living where they're supervised. Because if they're out there and they're breaking the law, they're obviously not doing the things that they should be doing. I don't have any problems with kids who are out there living on their own, that are doing the right thing, that are getting the job done, that are going to school, that are working, whatever. I mean, if they don't come to our attention, then they're obviously doing some of the right things. But the kids who are out there living on their own, that are breaking the law, that are doing things to try and help themselves survive, they obviously need some help with the growing up process, and so they need somebody to care for them, whether it be a parent or a temporary legal custodian, whomever. In order to get a free education thing, I don't know what that's directed towards. I don't know anything about that.
This is another call-in question directed to any of you. Did any of the officers have run-ins with the law when they were young?
Did the law run into us, or what? I guess I'd like to respond to it. All these guys said they got into law enforcement because they went on Citizens Ride. I got to go on a Citizens Ride too, but they were in the front seat and I was in the back. So, you know, that's how we got it. And you know, I stubbed my toe growing up. That's what got me involved with this. You know, growing up is difficult procedure. It's difficult to do, and it's even more difficult for the kids growing up now. And so that's how I got involved. And like I said, these guys were lucky. They got to ride in the front seat.
I rode in the back seat once behind Dick over here. I got arrested for curfew. That's the only time I've been arrested, though, and that includes 3 years in a fraternity, so I guess I did pretty good.
The only thing I can really think of is like traffic tickets, and you know, but I didn't have any major run-ins. And like I said, I became a friend with an officer in high school, and he had a real big influence on me, so you know, that may have been one thing.
I think one of the important facts I kind of brought up a little earlier was we only see about 10% of you young people on 2 or more occasions. 90% of you we may only meet once or twice in your juvenile lives, and that once or twice may be traffic, maybe IP, maybe curfew. You may be a victim, you may be a witness, you may be a suspect. But as far as I was concerned, I was a witness, I was a victim, and I was a suspect. So nothing serious, but I did have a couple of meetings with law enforcement. Believe me, 16 years ago, 20 years ago, we didn't have the same communication. They weren't as open as they are now. We lived by a different set of rules. But to say that we were wild, beer drinking, party throwing guys, not me, sorry.
Now a question from Keeley.
Yes, this question is for Officer Lewis. What exactly is done to someone attending a party with alcohol if they are not drinking and it is proved that they aren't?
Well, again, I think it's hard to deal with situations unless you're there with everything that's at the situation. There's numerous ways it can be handled. I tell the kids in criminology, and I'm going to real quickly interject, if you have an opportunity as a young person in the high school systems in Missoula take a criminology class, please do so. It's a real eye-opener. They take you right inside not only law enforcement, but judicial system, the attorneys, the correctional system, the whole thing, and you get a real good look at it from the inside. But again, when we go to a house party, we have a job to do. I don't know if the person that you're talking about may have just driven up in a car, was standing in line at the cake, didn't get a chance to get there, and that's why they haven't been drinking. And of course, when that young man goes home to mom and dad, or young lady, what are they going to say? I wasn't drinking, I was just there. Why were you there? I guess we got to start talking about peer pressure or whatever reason you made that choice, and it reverts back to you made the responsible choice to be at that party. You know you're underage. The alcohol is available. Because you didn't put it in your mouth, I have no way of knowing why you didn't. The opportunity is there, the availability is there, and you're there. So the officer then has to make a decision on how you're going to handle that situation. I think it's imperative that parent be made aware of where you're at. I think all you young people on that panel over there have heard about a friend or someone who has went to a party or went to somewhere and have been standing around watching a fight or standing around watching something and got hurt. Being just standing by, just watching, a bystander. So I guess the answer is, I can't give you a specific answer, but those are the things that we have to take in consideration as an officer when we go to a large gathering, a party, or driving down the street, you and your friend in the car, and your friend's got beer in the car. I didn't know it was there. We as officers, believe it or not, get lied to occasionally. And it's hard sometimes to decipher that truth.
I think one thing we respond to also is probably 9 times out of 10, we're not, just dropping in there. We're there because we've gotten a complaint from somebody. And so someone's good time is apparently overflowing into somebody else's rights and bothering them, either noise or beer cans on the neighbor's lawn or whatever. So like I said, we go to these things generally because somebody else's rights have been infringed on somehow, and we got to, try to sell it the best we can.
This is a question from the audience. Why aren't you stricter with the side street stop sign laws, to Guy Baker?
I guess to answer that as a whole, when we're on patrol, we're looking for anything that looks suspicious, any traffic violations. I mean, all these things are occurring while we're driving. If something happens in front of us, then you're going to do something about it. The citizen complaints that come through our traffic division, through the traffic sergeant there, he'll put up at briefings areas where we're getting complaints, and I'm sure, it's obvious some places that we sit on 23rd, for example, 23rd and Briggs. That's not to fill our quota, that's because that's one of the highest areas in the city we get complaints. And so we tend to be at specific points where we're getting complaints, and other than that, if a traffic violation occurs in front of us, then that officer deals with it the way he does. If that person in the audience, all they have to do is call the police department at 523-4777 and ask to
Sounds
be...
like a Jerry Brown ad.
Kind of give money. Asked to speak with the traffic sergeant, who is Sergeant Dykus, and they can put in the problems they're having in their neighborhood or whatever, and he'll get something done about that.
Officer Lewis, would you like to respond?
Very quickly, a couple things. Number one is when you have an area of the city limits of Missoula with over 35,000 people, we have hundreds of square miles of city streets, we have hundreds of stop signs to watch. We'll have anywhere from 5 to 8 cars on patrol. And it's very hard to get 8 cars to 700 stop signs. Unless we get some communication from the public saying we've got a problem, specific problem of the time, the day, and where it's at, it's real hard for a supervisor to assign a car when you've got calls coming in, because our priority is to serve you and protect you and answer that call, because that's an immediate need for help. I mean, we'll certainly go out and work any traffic area that we can, but again, we've got a limited number of amount of resources to go out and effectively do. For instance, at any given day at 3:30, we have 100 stop signs in Missoula that people call and say, these high school kids are racing through here at 100 miles an hour. So at that point, we also get an increase in our shoplifting calls from young people. who seem that when school gets out, they like to get a treat for after school or whatever it may be. We have an officer or two tied up with those kind of young individuals. We have a traffic accident or two. The next thing you know, we're down to 1 or 2 cars that we have to keep clear to answer. Therefore, traffic gets prioritized down. But please give us a call, let us know, and we'll try to do the best we can.
This is a calling question from Scott Bellew. Do officers feel they get enough recognition for their accomplishments and feats they perform? To any of the officers?
Well, I think it's like anything else. You enjoy recognition, and that's one of the basic things that motivates people. And as far as enough recognition, I think a lot of times you get to feeling sorry for yourself because you deal with a lot of mundane stuff. But I know, like at my office, if one of my supervisors, it doesn't have to be a big Academy Award type thing, but if somebody makes an effort to come up to you and said, hey, that call you're on the other day where you did this or that was a good job, it makes you feel good. And I think that's just with any job. Doesn't have to be police officers, but any job you want a little bit of recognition, especially from your peers, because they kind of go through the same thing.
This question is directed to Glenn Welsh, and it's from the audience. If a teenager is arrested, does it go on his or her record, and if so, how long does it stay on?
Okay. If a teenager is arrested, there's 2 or 3 different parts of the system. If a teenager is just arrested and one of the officers writes a ticket and checks it and warrant counseled and adjusted, and it stays with the city police department, there will be no record other than what's kept over here. If the ticket is referred over to our office and an intake takes place, then there is a record. Now that's what we call an informal record. And an informal proceeding and informal records, we try and keep most of the kids that we deal with in an informal system. The informal system is where the kid and the parents are dealing with the probation officer in an informal manner, and a district court hearing has not taken place. If we can keep kids in that setting, they do have a record, but the record is an informal record, and the record is sealed when they turn 18, but we have to keep those files and those tickets until for 10 years after they turn 18, until the youth is 20 years old. No one can get into that record unless they have a court order. Once that file is sealed, it's sealed, period. If we get record checks for kids going in the service, record checks for kids going in the Secret Service, the Postal Service, wherever we get record checks from, if that kid has just been in to see a probation officer in the informal proceedings, then we put on those record checks and the kid has no record. Now, if the kid graduates and ends up in district court for whatever reason, whether it be for committing a whole bunch of crimes and it just got to the point where we couldn't handle the kid informally, or he commits a crime that's a real bad one and ends up in district court, if he's adjudicated or found guilty at that point, then the kid does have a court record, and that court record will stay with him forever.
At this time, I'd like to introduce the next moderator, Julie Partaker, a junior at Big Sky.
Okay, I guess I'll start with a question from the audience. This is from Lindsay Metzger. What determines the punishment for an IP? I have friends that have 7+ and have never had to do anything, and others who have had 1 and have been put on probation.
I'd like to answer that.
All
I
right.
have a hard time believing that a kid had 7+ IPs and nothing has been done, especially if it's been in my office. And if that's the case, I would like to review that file. I have a hard time believing that. But then again, we have a situation where we have a whole bunch of different referral systems. So a kid may have had 7 tickets. 1 ticket may be kept in the police department. 1 ticket may have come to our department. A ticket from another agency may have gone to justice court. 1 may have gone to city court. So that may have happened. 7 tickets coming to my office with nothing happened. I have a hard time believing that, and I would like to check with my officers to find out if that's the case. Where 1 ticket, 1 time a kid gets put on probation, there may have been some real extenuating circumstances. Was that kid driving a vehicle when he was drunk? If that kid was driving a vehicle when he was drunk, that is an extenuating circumstance. I think we look a little bit more harshly on a kid who's driving and drinking than a kid who's standing around with a beer. Or we have a kid who's drunk and passed out in the middle of the street. We take a look at that situation and we analyze it. So what I'm trying to say is we try and take, in my agency, we try and take each case individually, try and analyze each case and try and do the best we can with each case. But like I say, there could be a kid who got 7 tickets and those tickets were scattered out around, that went to different agencies, handled in different places. But kid who had 7 tickets that come into our agency, some things are going to start happening after the second or third one, I can guarantee it. And if somebody's saying those things, that nothing's happening to me, I don't think you're getting straight scoop.
I think Officer or Sergeant Lewis would like to add something to that.
Very quickly. Again, our department now has the policy we don't pop and pour beer. A couple reasons. Number one is we want to be able to track a young person in case they have a problem with that drug. Alcohol's a drug, a depressant. There are a lot of young people out there who can't handle alcohol, and one of the ways we'd be able to track that young person to see if they need help or have a serious problem is by the amount of alcohol tickets they're getting. We're not going to pop a beer out and say, go on home and allow you to drive. The officer then becomes liable and can be sued civilly, and the city of Missoula is also liable and can be sued. We're not going to just pour the beer. I think it's real imperative that not only curfew and IP, those parents need to be aware of what that youth is doing at night. And that's part of the communication we have to open up with that parent. They might not want to hear the information they're going to get at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're not going to be real happy coming down to that police department picking up a young man or young lady who's sitting there throwing up in the garbage can, hopefully, not on the floor. But I think it's imperative that those parents are aware of what those young people are doing and the situation they had themselves in. Those IP tickets, I don't think in all the years I've been around here that I've ever heard of a young man or a young lady who honestly got 7 written citations with nothing being done to them. That, to me, I would like to talk to the individual because I think they're kind of, playing the big shot for all the kids.
Keely, do you have another question?
Yes, this question is for Officer Baker. Do you really chase down or arrest kids who run from kegs or parties?
Keggers usually held out of the city limits up in the mountains, and that would be Stanley's area, but depends. I mean, you go to a party, everybody's going to run. That's just part of the party plan, right? When the police get there, everybody just takes off. And I guess we try as best we can, but we don't catch everyone. I mean, when we go to a party, we might have 2 or 3 officers, 4 or 5 at the most, and those are the big ones where you arrest maybe 30 or 40. But when you chase someone, I mean, that has direct relation on how bad you want them or what they did, their crime. A lot of officers, I'm sure, are they going to chase a kid through yards and everything just for illegal possession? I don't know. But at every party you pull up to, kids take off. So I don't know if that answered the question. He can answer about the wild woods.
Well, when we get calls of keggers, generally we got a situation, we'll have 1 or 2 deputies going up, wherever, 15, 20 miles out of town. And we would prefer when we show up that people don't run off because we have a lot of concerns for safety. We've had situations where we're getting a call from some parent at 4 in the morning saying, hey, I found out from calling around to her friends or his friends, whatever, that my kid was up at this party you guys busted, and she hasn't come home yet, or he hasn't come home yet. And all of a sudden we're worried, did this kid see the sheriff cars take off and is up there without a ride, 30 miles from Missoula, and in inclement weather, whatever. So our big concern on especially kegger calls is we want to get people out of there and get them home safe. We don't want someone, having to hoof it out. Someone, like I said, get picked up by strangers and get in a bad situation that way. So, kids, at least they're out there listening. We'd prefer, like I said, you don't take off because it's a little different situation. You're not in a position where you can walk 5 blocks and you're home. You're 30 miles out of town.
Joe?
Officer Lewis, do you feel that police officers are more likely to give breaks to adults than teenagers on topics like speeding, traffic violations?
No, because I'll tell you, an officer has to take in consideration on a young person. We have more of an impact with our pen, and I always tell young people in class, I can do more damage with this than I can my gun to a young person, and it's true. With your insurance rates, the situations you get into with your parents, the problems we can cause. It's not going to have any bearing on what we're going to do. We have a job we have to do. We're told at the police academy in Bozeman, you make your decision up before you get out of the car, and whatever happens between that time and when you write your citation, don't let it influence your decision, because you're writing on a violation, not on a person. We have kids all the time say, well, you just sit and watch for me because I got a pretty car, it's hopped up, and it sounds mean. Well, usually that hopped up car, it sounds mean, has got my attention by laying 7 blocks of rubber. I mean, that certainly is going to get my adrenaline going a little bit and saying, hey, that young man needs to be chatted with. And when you walk up and it's a young lady, you say, yo. So those kind of things. But as far as giving breaks, that's an officer's discretion. I mean, it's going to be place, time, location, what kind of violation it was, how serious was it, what kind of pedestrian traffic, what kind of vehicular traffic. The attitude is going to play into it, I'm sure. But again, it goes right back to the officers. Is a warning going to suffice? Is it going to stop this problem? I'll tell you right now, in 16 years, and one of the things that I've based a lot of my decisions on is warnings do not work. If I stop you, Joe, today for a stop sign and I say, Joe, don't do that, tomorrow or the next day, maybe you remember, a week down the road, you're going to drive right through. But if I write you a ticket, you're going to pull up and say, where's that dirty so-and-so hiding? What are you going to do? You're going to stop and look for me. I mean, I've done my job. So it all depends on how the officer feels he needs to perceive that and do his job.
Okay, I have a question from the audience now. This is for Glenn Welsh. I have heard that the number of juvenile delinquents in Missoula have doubled in the last year. Is this true? And if so, do you have any ideas why?
Oh, I don't think they've doubled in the last year. I think that our caseloads are up, but I don't think the number of juvenile delinquents have doubled. And when we start talking about juvenile delinquents, we're talking about semantical kinds of things too. When you say juvenile delinquent to me, I'm talking about somebody who's gone into district court who has been adjudicated to be a delinquent, which is pretty serious. Juvenile delinquents to, I'm sure some of the folks here are kids who are just in trouble. Our caseloads are up, but the numbers are not up all that considerably. I don't think that things have doubled.
Okay, we only have about 10 more minutes left, and I would like to remind any viewers, if they have any last-minute calls, to please call in. The numbers are 523-4686 and 523-4685. Jennifer?
I have a question for Officer Baker. This comes from a Hellgate senior. Do you feel there's an increase in gang participation and activity in the Missoula area?
I would say there's an increase in gang mentality with the kids here in Missoula. At this time, we don't have any recognizable street gangs, and by definition, set by larger cities, we don't have street gangs here. The difference between street gangs and youth gangs are, youth gangs still go to school, they're 13 to 17, and they partake in criminal activity after school and on the weekends. I'd say that the mentality is there, and that just might be a societal norm in America in the 90s. We have Crips and Bloods traveling through, but there are no sets here in Missoula. I'd say along with that mentality, though, there's been an increase in violence, in assaults and disturbances involving kids, as well as kids and guns since the summer of '91. But at this time, we don't have gangs in Missoula.
Jessica?
A Hellgate sophomore asked, what are your feelings on the legalization of marijuana and why? I'd say it should be directed to each one.
You want me to start?
Sure.
My feelings are pretty obvious. I think that it would be a terrible mistake. I think any drug or anything that alters your mood or alters your state of mind is something that needs to be controlled. We hear the medicinal purposes argument all the time. I think if something's done for medicinal purpose, then it's going to be a prescription drug. It's not going to be an illegal drug. So I think that any time that you have people that are losing control of their faculties, you have a situation where people are going to get hurt, or somebody's going to get injured, or they're going to get injured themselves. All the physical things that we're hearing that marijuana does to you is quite obvious that it should not be legalized. And I know that there's going to be arguments about cigarettes and about beer and about all that other wonderful stuff, but it's still an illegal drug, and I feel it should remain an illegal drug.
Okay, this is a call-in question from Scott Blue. What cases in general are the most difficult both physically and mentally? Anybody like to answer that?
I think anytime you deal with things involving real little kids, they're, you know, they tend to pull on your emotional heartstrings, whatever, especially if there's a death or severe injury. I'm also a coroner, so I have to deal a lot with families. And it's not a very good feeling walking up to someone's door at 8 or 9 at night in uniform and have to notify them a family member has been killed in a car wreck or whatever. And it's kind of one of those things you always think, well, geez, they're going to remember you forever. You know, you're the guy that, you know, walked up to my door and told me, you know, so-and-so got killed. So I think those are the ones, me personally, I have the biggest dislike for that. And like I said, incidents involving small children, either where they've been beat on or somehow abused, I guess.
Anyone else?
I guess I'll respond with, I guess it eats on you going to a call with a family unit and seeing that unit in turmoil and seeing your inability to actually give them some kind of functional help. We're very limited with our system and with our resources, and the community gets taxed to the max. And you get very frustrated in your inability to help the people who are falling through the cracks. You never deal with death very well in this job, or I don't anyway. It affects me. But your inability to just reach out to someone and give them that little something they need, whether it be the system, whether it be financially you can't do it, or you just don't have the manpower, whatever it may be. And I know Glenn's in the same kind of boat. We refer an awful lot of kids where their system just physically can't cope with a lot of the problems they have. I mean, we just don't have the facilities to keep them in, or the money to finance the help they really, really need. We're kind of like a Band-Aid society. And that becomes real frustrating for an officer seeing it day in, day out, day in, day out.
Okay, this is a call-in from Chris Satchett, a Loyola Junior, and this is for Glenn Welsh. He wants to know if you are harder on your daughter because of what you see and come in contact with every day.
Probably.
Okay, Keely? This question is, I guess, either for Officer Lewis or Officer Baker. Is there a certain time that a car stereo is considered too loud?
A certain time? We don't have anything set right now in the city as far as I'm aware of, as far as a certain time that car stereos need to be put down. Anytime I start receiving complaints from citizens who call up and or someone sitting Greeno Park or whatever, and you can hear the thing 3 blocks away, I become concerned at that time, and we're going to have an officer respond. And right now it's going to be an officer discretion as far as how loud is too loud and what time is the best to shut them down. I'm not against them totally, but I think we need a little monitoring of them. And if we keep the abuse up, I'm sure down the road you're going to get that kind of thing. I mean, you get, again, the abuse, if it keeps going, we'll have to respond to what the citizens want.
Those are, you know, those are the kind of calls you get, you know, what's one guy's entertainment's another guy's frustration or whatever. And generally, if we're out warning someone about, you know, loud music, it's because we've gotten calls from citizens. You got, you know, some guy trying to sleep or whatever, but on the reverse side of the coin, we'll get them at 9 in the morning, some guy calling up and says, hey, you know, kid next door is playing his stereo too loud, and you go out there and here's a kid washing his car and he's got his boombox on, and it's like, well, you know, no one's trying to sleep, and it's really not that big a deal. But what you try to do basically is just satisfy both parties. You know, you ask the other guy, you know, if you crank it down a little bit, make me happy, and that'll hopefully, you know, handle the other deal. But what you're trying to do, you're basically a balancing act for everybody, trying to you know, on one hand, let the guy enjoy his boom box, and on the other hand, keep the neighbor guy satisfied. And a lot of times you don't do it. Sometimes you know, some people just are never satisfied, and you're not gonna, you know, you do your best.
Officer Lewis?
I just want to shoot a question across to someone on the panel over there, or Keeley, or whoever wants to answer it. What do you feel when an officer pops up and says, "Turn down the radio, Keeley, I can hear it clear at my house and it's 10 blocks away"? Are your rights have been violated, or you feel like, you know, we're pushing you, or what's your side of the coin? I'd be a little interested to hear from somebody.
Well, I guess I would probably turn it down if a lot of complaints were made, but I guess, you know, if I am in my own car, and if there's not very many people around at the time, a lot of residential areas, and if it's downtown and there aren't people sleeping, you know, I'd probably ask why, and I'd want to know, and I'd want your opinion on it too, as well.
Okay, we do have another question from the audience. This is from Linda Hansen, and this is directed at the teen panel, and she would like to know if you could suggest any ways to improve prevention of alcohol and drug use among teenagers.
I'll address that. I think one of the topics we addressed earlier with the advertising of alcohol and stuff is if you can have some kind of law just like they have with not having ads on television about tobacco, cigarettes. I mean, if you can pass something like that, I think it would help. But I think no matter what you do, kids are going to drink and there's going to be problems. So I think that's what I feel.
Does anybody over here have any comments to say about that?
Jessica, how much peer pressure do you have to drink in high school in Missoula?
How much peer pressure?
To belong to the groups and to feel like you belong and are a normal student, just to consume alcohol and or smoke or whatever.
I think I myself don't have that much, but I can see people around me do. I think peer pressure just is a matter of who you want to be. If peer pressure is an important issue, which everybody is saying it is, then I think it's time to address the people not as a big group, but as the people who are being pressured into drinking.
Okay, Joe?
I have a question for Mr. Welch. Is there anything a minor can do if they feel they've been treated unfairly by the police?
Well, you guys addressed earlier. I think that there's several different options. I think that if a minor feels he's been treated unfairly, I mean, he can talk to the supervisors in the appropriate department, whether it be the sheriff's department, the police department. Also, if that minor feels he's been treated unfairly and has to appear on intake, our officers are there for that purpose, and our officer will be more than happy to take a look at the situation and try and assess what took place. And if something happened that wasn't on the up and up, we'd be more than happy to either take the youth and the parent to the appropriate supervisor, or whatever the kid wanted to do, we'd be willing to help him out with it.
Can I interject? As a supervisor, I would really like the opportunity, and I know the rest of us would too, is we got an officer that you feel you have a problem with and you're treated unfairly, is to come to his immediate supervisor and at least let us be aware of the problem and see what it was and do it as quickly as you can. I mean, these things that sit for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 weeks are very hard for us as supervisors to address and officers to respond to. If you're wronged and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you just got home, I'd appreciate a phone call. I'd even appreciate it more face-to-face. Either I'll come to your house or you can come down to my house here, whichever you feel comfortable. But we would really like to be made aware, and I'm sure Stan's the same way if he's got a problem with one of his men, that we'd like to be made aware of it right away and give us an opportunity. I'm not saying we can solve it all, but please give us the opportunity to find out what happened and what went on and try to answer some of your questions.
Okay, I'd like to try to fit one last question in here. This is a call-in, I think. How does law enforcement feel about window tinting? And this is from a Sentinel senior. Anyone like to?
Now there again, that's set down by the legislature. I can say one thing personally though, dealing with traffic stops, especially at night, depending on what the reason is you're stopping the vehicle, if I feel my safety is compromised due to the window tinting and I ask the occupants of the vehicle to step out over the PA system, they might take offense to that, but A lot of times they might not understand, and there again, that would depend on why I was stopping the vehicle. But I would say there's some compromise to our safety if we can't clearly see in the vehicle. That would, maybe these guys could add to that.
Yeah, I want to agree with Guy. Depending on why we're stopping, it seems to be vans predominantly. I don't know why, but they seem to be the vehicles that are tinted more often than not. If you're stopping that vehicle for a particular reason and you can't really see what's going on, it heightens your anxiety level, and you're just liable to be treating those people a little bit more different than if you could see what's going on. And we've had officers killed in Missoula, which I never thought in my career would happen, but it happens here. So that's probably one reason why I don't really have any problem with it other than that. But from a officer safety standpoint, it does heighten your anxiety.
We are running out of time, and it is time to bring this forum to a close. We would like to thank all of you attending, and we would like to also thank those of you who watched. I hope we answered some of your questions and concerns. I would like to encourage participation, and if you don't know how to get involved, all you have to do is get a hold of your school's representatives, and the Big Sky representatives are myself, Julie Partaker, and Jessica Trexler. For Hellgate, the representatives are Cami Darnell and Jennifer Getz. For Sentinel, the representatives are Ann Morin and Keely Flateau. And for Loyola, Kagan Yoakum and Joe Mudd. We really are encouraging involvement. Also, we would like to thank all the members of the Mayor's Youth Council, the Messenger, KPAX TV, the Missoulian, KGVO and FM 102 Radio, and MCAT Television. And a very special thanks to the Assistant Chief of Police, Pete Lawrence, and Gary Hewitt for all their help. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so people walking on that road.
All right.